David Miller came home from the war with little more than the clothes on his back and the hand of his young son, Leo, clutched in his own. His savings were gone, his house was gone, but his dream of giving Leo a safe place to live burned brighter than ever. He scoured the classifieds, his hope fading a little more with each new listing he couldn't afford. Then, one day, he saw a small, almost desperate ad, "Old cabin for sale, $50. Everyone he asked said the same thing. "Don't bother, Miller. It's not a cabin, it's a ruin." They said it was worthless, a rotting shell swallowed by tangled vines, a graveyard of broken wood. But to a man who had once found shelter in muddy trenches and slept under the constant threat of rain and gunfire, even a ruin was a promise. He emptied his pockets, handing over his last $50 for the deed. They found it hidden deep in the woods, just as described, a forgotten skeleton of a house. But as David pushed the warped door open, a beam of sunlight cut through the dusty air, and Leo's small voice broke the silence. "Dad, look," he whispered, pointing at the wall. Carved into the old, weathered wood were dozens of names, dozens of soldiers, who had once found sanctuary within these same walls, during a different, long-forgotten war. It wasn't just a broken cabin. It was a hidden memorial, a silent testament to the lives that had passed through its doors. A wave of reverence washed over David. He hadn't just bought a house. He had found a place of honor, a sacred ground that needed his care. Hand in hand, father and son began to rebuild. They pulled back the tangled vines, patched the rotting wood, and replaced the broken windows. With every swing of the hammer, David wasn't just building a house, he was building a home, a tribute to the soldiers whose names were etched into its very heart. Together, they transformed the ruined cabin into a place of peace, a sanctuary for their family and a monument to all those who had come before. Years turned the broken cabin into a sturdy home, and the silent tribute on the walls became the heart of the family. David and Leo lived a peaceful life there, their days filled with the simple rhythm of repairing, building, and remembering. But one day, a car pulled up the long, winding driveway, and a man with silver hair and a tired smile got out. He carried a single, worn photograph. "My name is Thomas," the man said, his eyes fixed on the cabin. "I fought in the war. I heard a rumor that this place still stood." He explained that he had taken shelter in the cabin decades ago. His best friend, a soldier named Sam, had carved his name into the wall just before he was killed in action. Thomas had never had the chance to say goodbye. When he saw the name Sam on the wall, a wave of emotion washed over him. He finally had a place to mourn, a place to honor his friend. Word of the cabin spread, and soon, other veterans, their families, and even curious historians came to visit. The quiet memorial became a place of healing. They came to see the names, to share stories, and to find a sense of closure. The cabin was no longer just David and Leo's home. It was a sanctuary for all who had been touched by war. David and Leo, the stewards of this sacred place, listened to every story and welcomed every visitor with open arms. They understood now that the cabin's true worth wasn't in its wood or its land, but in the memories it held and the hope it offered. It was a home built not just on dreams, but on the enduring legacy of courage and sacrifice. As more people visited the cabin, a local newspaper reporter named Sarah caught wind of the story. Intrigued by the idea of a veteran's home that doubled as a living memorial, she reached out to David for an interview. David, a private man, was hesitant. He had built this home for his son, not for public acclaim. But Leo, now a teenager, saw the bigger picture. "Dad," he said, "these people need to know. It's not just our story, it's theirs, too." Heeding his son's words, David agreed. Sarah spent days with them, listening to the stories of the names on the walls, and the veterans who came to visit. She wrote an article that wasn't just a news story. It was a tribute to the quiet dignity of a man who had found his purpose in honoring others. The article, "A Soldier Sanctuary," went viral. Donations poured in. From all over the country, people wanted to help preserve this special place. An anonymous donor, a wealthy widow whose father had been one of the soldiers named on the wall, offered a substantial sum to establish a foundation. The Miller Memorial Foundation was born, dedicated to preserving the cabin. and creating a retreat for veterans and their families. With the foundation's support, David and Leo were able to build small, rustic cabins nearby for visiting veterans. They established a garden of remembrance and created workshops, where veterans could learn skills, like woodworking and gardening, finding purpose and peace in the same place David had. The old cabin, once a forgotten ruin, became a beacon of hope. It was a place where old soldiers found solace, where families found healing, and where a father and son, with nothing but their love and a shared dream, had built a legacy far greater than they could have ever imagined. The years passed, and the Miller Memorial Foundation flourished. The small, peaceful retreat became a sanctuary not just for veterans, but for their families as well. Leo, now an adult with a family of his own, had taken on the mantle of managing the foundation, his father's legacy alive in every action he took. David, now an old man with a full head of silver hair, spent his days doing what he loved most, sitting on the cabin's front porch, whittling wood and talking with the veterans who came to visit. He was a quiet, constant presence, a living embodiment of the hope the cabin represented. He had found his purpose in the peace he helped create for others. One crisp autumn afternoon, a young soldier named Michael arrived at the cabin. He was quiet and withdrawn, his eyes full of a pain David knew all too well. He had recently returned from his first tour of duty and was struggling to find his place in the world. He had no family, no home, and felt completely lost. David welcomed him in, offering him a cup of coffee and a seat by the fireplace. They didn't speak of war, of battles, or of loss. Instead, David showed Michael the names on the wall, telling him the stories of the men who had come before him, who had found a fleeting moment of peace in this very room. As the sun set, casting a warm glow on the wooden walls, Michael finally spoke. "I don't know what to do," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm not the same person I was." David looked at the young man, his eyes full of compassion. "You're not supposed to be, son," he said gently. "Life changes us. War changes us. But it doesn't have to define you. This cabin, it's not a place to hide from the past. It's a place to honor it and to build a new future." That night, for the first time in months, Michael slept soundly. He spent the next few weeks at the retreat, learning to whittle from David, helping Leo in the gardens, and sharing stories with other veterans. He found not a cure for his pain, but a path forward. He left with a newfound sense of hope, a list of contacts, and a plan to start his own woodworking business. The old cabin, once a symbol of David's poverty and despair, had become a testament to his strength and resilience. It was a home built on a foundation of faith, transformed by a father's love for his son, and dedicated to the enduring spirit of all who serve. And in its peaceful walls, a former soldier found not just a new life, but a new purpose and a way to finally be at peace. Years passed, and the Miller Memorial Foundation's reputation grew, attracting not only veterans but also historians and scholars interested in the cabin's unique story. The names carved into its walls were no longer just a list. They were a subject of serious research, leading to the discovery of long-lost diaries and letters from the soldiers who had once sheltered there. One afternoon, a renowned historian named Dr. Aries Thorne arrived. He was a stern, skeptical man who saw the cabin as little more than a romanticized relic. He was there to study the logistics of the old war, not to be moved by a sentimental story. He spent days poring over the names, cross-referencing them with military records. He was professional and detached, but David, now frail and walking with a cane, saw something in his eyes, a hunger for something more than facts. On the last day of his visit, Dr. Thorne approached David on the porch. He held a small, leather-bound journal. This belonged to a soldier named Private John Thorne. He said, his voice unusually soft, "He was my great-grandfather. He died in a hospital far from here, but his last entry, he wrote about this cabin. He called it the quietest place in the world." The historian's stoic demeanor finally cracked. He had spent his life studying history from a distance. But here, in this humble cabin, the past had become personal. He saw his great-grandfather's name on the wall, and understood the true meaning of the place. It was not just a home, but a living connection to a shared history of sacrifice and survival. Dr. Thorne returned to his university not as a skeptic, but as an advocate. He used his influence to establish a scholarship in Private Thorn's name, dedicated to preserving military history and supporting the Miller Memorial Foundation's work. The cabin story, once confined to a small community, now echoed in academic halls across the country. It was a testament to the power of a single act of faith, to a father's unwavering dream, and to a forgotten cabin that became a sanctuary for the hearts of all who sought peace and remembrance. As the years continued to pass, the story of the cabin became a legend. It was a place where generations of soldiers and their families came to feel a sense of belonging, a place of peace in a world often defined by conflict. The Miller Memorial Foundation thrived, and the small retreat grew into a sprawling campus with new buildings, a library filled with military history, and a counseling center for veterans struggling with the invisible wounds of war. David, now in his 90s, watched it all unfold from his rocking chair on the porch. His body was frail, but his eyes still held the same fire and compassion they did the day he first laid eyes on the ruined cabin. He was a hero not for his actions in war, but for the life he built after it. One evening, Leo sat with his father on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. "Dad," Leo said, his voice thick with emotion, "look at what you've done." David smiled, a gentle, knowing expression on his face. "I didn't do this alone, son," he said, his voice a soft rasp. "I just bought a cabin. You and all the others, you made it a home." He looked at the peaceful grounds, at the veterans laughing around a bonfire, at the families playing in the garden. He thought back to that day, so long ago, when he had nothing but his son and a dream. He had found a forgotten cabin, but in that ruin, he had discovered a purpose far greater than he could have ever imagined. It was a testament to the fact that even in the quietest, most forgotten places, hope could be found, and legacies could be built. David lived out his final years in the home he had built, a quiet patriarch to a growing family of veterans and their loved ones. When he finally passed away peacefully in his sleep, the news spread not as a tragedy, but as a quiet, somber tribute. The veteran community, from all corners of the country, came to the cabin to mourn and to celebrate the life of the man who had changed so many. They gathered around a new memorial plaque, one not for a soldier lost in battle, but for a soldier who had found his purpose in peace. It read, "In memory of David Miller, a soldier who built not a fortress, but a sanctuary. His legacy is the peace he gave to others." Leo, now a man in his prime, stood by the plaque, watching the sun set over the peaceful grounds his father had created. The old cabin, now a historic landmark, stood sturdy and proud behind him, its carved walls holding the silent stories of the past, the sounds of laughter and quiet. Conversation from the veterans and their families filled the air, a living testament to the hope his father had found in a hopeless place. The cabin was no longer just a memorial to the soldiers of the past. It was a beacon for the future, a reminder that even when a person has nothing, they still have the power to create something beautiful, something lasting. The story of David Miller and his ruined cabin was no longer just a family legend. It was a timeless epic of love, resilience, and the enduring power of a single, simple act of faith.